Hello and welcome to Misterios Divinos podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're diving deep, really deep, into the shadows of ancient theology. We're going to tackle a question that's as fascinating as it is controversial. It's a mystery that goes back centuries, and it just might hint at a world that existed long before our own.
So here's the central question we're looking at today. Were there actually people on Earth before Adam? I mean, is the story that we all know the whole story? Or is it possible it's just one chapter in a much, much longer saga? This, right here, is the heart of what's called the pre-Adamic theory.
And this is not some new crazy idea. Not at all. Let's call them shadows of this hypothesis, they've been shaped by scholars for ages. We're talking everyone from the Roman Emperor Julian all the way to Calvinist theologians. It's really this subtle dance of interpretations, right? A serious attempt to figure out the hidden clues you can find in the biblical narrative.
All right, so where do we even start with this investigation? Well, we've got to begin with a really key figure, a 17th century theologian named Isaac de la Peyrère. This guy, he wove this incredibly dark and complex tapestry of ideas. He basically reimagined the very first days of creation, and in doing so, he presented what he believed was the first real evidence for this whole theory. Okay. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Peyrère's whole theory is built on this radical idea. He didn't propose one creation event, but two. First, he said, came the creation of the Gentiles, the nations of the world, on the sixth day, right alongside the other beasts. And then there was a second, totally separate and special creation, Adam, the father of the Jews, who he says was created on the seventh day. You see, this is the absolute foundation of his entire argument.
So you're probably asking, where on earth did he get this from? Well, Peyrère pointed to what he saw as, these shadows in the text. Little things that don't quite add up. Think about it for a second. After Cain kills Abel, he's afraid that other people will kill him. But who are these others? His only family is supposed to be Adam and Eve, right? And where did he find a wife? And maybe the biggest question of all, how could one man build an entire city? For Peyrère, these weren't just plot holes. They were clues. And they all pointed to one thing. Another race of people had to exist at the same time.
And he didn't stop there. Peyrère went so far as to reinterpret the very idea of sin to make his theory work. He looked at the book of Romans and came up with this. He suggested that, the pre-Adamic Gentiles sinned, but their sin was against the natural, moral will of God. Adam's sin, on the other hand, was way, way worse because he broke a direct, explicit command from God. So you get this duality of sin, which paints the whole biblical story with this brand new, really complex moral layer.
Okay, so this theory seems pretty compelling, right? It kind of ties up some loose ends. But here comes the plot twist. Because when you take this dark tapestry he wove and hold it up to the light of the rest of Scripture, well, those shadows start to disappear pretty quickly. Some really serious contradictions pop up that challenge the whole foundation we've just been looking at.
The first problem, and it's a big one, is this. The Bible flat out calls Adam the first man. And that's not just some throwaway title, it's a foundational statement about humanity. So the idea that there was a whole race of people before him, well, it directly contradicts that. That's a huge problem for this theory right out of the gate.
And the plot thickens when we look at how the world is described right before Adam shows up. If you look at Genesis chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, it's pretty clear. It says that before Adam was formed, the earth was empty, devoid of man to work the ground. So the picture we get isn't some bustling, populated world. It's an empty one, just waiting for its caretaker.
And finally, we have what might be the nail in the coffin for this theory. It's the description of Eve as the mother of all living. I mean, if she is literally the mother of all living people, then that doesn't leave any room for other human family trees, does it? It means there's no other lineage for Cain to have found a wife from. And right there, on that one point, the whole theory really starts to fall apart.
But hold on, the mystery doesn't just end there. The questions that Peyrère was asking, they were real questions that people had. So naturally, another theory popped up to try and answer them. So let's follow this new lead, shall we? It's a concept known as the gap theory.
All right, so the gap theory focuses right on the very first two verses of Genesis. The idea is that there's this huge, unstated gap of time, we're talking maybe millions of years, smack dab between verse 1, the original creation, and verse 2, where the earth suddenly becomes formless and void. People who believe this theory suggest that in that gap, a whole pre-Adamic civilization rose and then was destroyed.
So that means the 6 days of creation we read about next, that's not a creation from scratch. It's a recreation, a remodeling of a ruined world. And Adam, he just shows up on the 6th day of this new age.
It's a really fascinating idea, right? But it has its own fatal flaw, and it's a big one. By putting the destruction of a whole world before Adam, you're introducing death, widespread death, into creation before Adam's sin. That creates a massive, massive conflict with one of the most central Christian doctrines, that death entered the world because of man's sin. It's a deep theological contradiction, and it's one that gap theory just can't get around.
So as we start to wrap up our investigation, you can really see how fragile these pre-Adamic ideas are. When you look at the clear statements in Scripture on one hand, and these massive theological contradictions on the other, these really complex theories, as cool as they sound, ultimately seem to be just shadows of misinterpretation.
And here's the real takeaway. The source material for this explainer puts it beautifully. It says that the shadows of the theories fade before the light of the truth of the Scriptures. In the end, the biblical text, when you look at it as a whole, really does act like a beacon of light, and it cuts right through the very shadows that created these theories in the first place.
But that does leave us with one last thing to think about, doesn't it? If these really elaborate theories don't hold up, then how do we explain those original puzzles that started all this? What about Cain's fear, his wife, the city he supposedly built? The theories might fade away, but the questions are still right there, embedded in the text, just inviting us to keep digging, to keep searching for answers.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. It was a really fascinating mystery to explore. If you liked the video, please do subscribe, leave a like, and definitely comment below with what you found most interesting. And of course, share the video. I can't wait to explore more of these divine mysteries with you next time.